Welcome to Right on Track, a songwriting podcast. Thanks to Tone for tuning in. I'm Demi Michelle Schwartz, and I'm thrilled you're joining me on my songwriting journey. So kick back and relax, don't fall flat, and remember, stay right on track. Hello, and welcome back to Right on Track. I am joined by a very special guest today, Kevin McCarty, who is the CEO and co-founder of We Should Write Sometime. Please welcome Kevin.
Hello. Thanks so much for having me.
Of course. I'm so excited to have you. How are you?
I'm doing wonderful. Nothing to complain about. Just excited to chat with you.
Fantastic. Well, I'm so excited you're joining me because we are going to be chatting all about networking for songwriters, We Should Write Sometime, and much more. But before we dive into that, can you share with the listeners a little about your own journey so far?
Sure. And I'll keep it pretty short because I know that these journey things can take a very long time. So I'll try to keep it brief. But I grew up, playing guitar and was in a band in high school and college, and it was super fun. And I loved music and just being around songwriters and musicians and just trying to make that a big part of my life. But I quickly realized that as I graduated college that, I wasn't good enough to make a career out of it. But I kind of had this big passion for the business world and tech world. And have always wanted to live in Nashville, but it just took quite some time. And so I kind of went into the corporate world, doing some sales stuff, some tech stuff, and then eventually about 7 years ago, found my way to Nashville to get into to move here and get into the music space, into the music tech space, and met my co-founder probably 2 weeks after I got here. And he and I became very close because he runs a nonprofit called Creative Vets, where he brings in combat disabled veterans from all over the country to write with number one songwriters here in Nashville to tell their story for the first time through music. And so we became really close because I was always going out to the writers' rounds and just trying to meet everybody I could in the industry. And he was out trying to find songwriters to be part of his nonprofit. And so it was kind of this serendipitous moment of us connecting and him having the idea of, hey, I think there's a problem on how songwriters are finding and connecting with each other. And, I need to find songwriters to be part of my nonprofit. And at the time I was doing a podcast, much like you're doing here, but we were interviewing songwriters and musicians. And one of the things that I kept hearing that I didn't really think about until it was brought to my attention was a lot of, great songwriters were saying, even in Nashville, you can meet a bunch of songwriters, but it was kind of hard to find the right ones to write music with and that matched well with you and you vibed with, and it was a good hang and all those things. You could find songwriters anywhere, but getting in a room with them and finding the right ones was very challenging for a lot of people. And, if you're not in a music town, it's even harder. And so when Richard came to me with this idea of just being able to sit on your couch and swipe through songwriters like you do kind of on the dating apps, it made a bunch of sense. And any songwriter out there knows co-writing and songwriting can be a lot like dating. So it just made sense to kind of model that user experience of swiping to find co-writers. And we launched it in late 2018, and here we are now.
That is such a great story. I love how you always had a passion for music and the tech world and kind of found your way of making those unite. And literally when I first learned about We Should Write Sometime and I saw like the tagline, I was like, Tinder for songwriters. I was like, this is the coolest thing ever.
Yeah. Funny story. I've had a handful of people, and genuinely a handful, be like, "Hey, is this for songwriters to date each other?" I was like, no. It's just set up a lot like it because in the app you can change your location if you're not in an area where there's a lot of songwriters around you. You can change your location in the app, so then you can put your profile in Nashville, LA, New York, Austin, and find songwriters in those areas, and then kind of do some virtual co-writing if that's what you like. So Yeah, it just makes it easy to explain kind of what it is and what it does.
Awesome. So let's dive into our chat today. Can you read an amazing quote by Sallie Krawcheck?
Yes, this is an amazing quote that I feel very strongly about. And it just says, my advice for folks on networking is give, give, give. You will later receive, but you are really planting these seeds. Some of them will die and they won't become anything. Many of them will take many, many years before they pay off for you, if at all. It's funny because I read that, and a part of the entrepreneurial world is I feel like there's a lot of similarities in there of just like, there's a lot that you give without anything being shown, and for quite some time. And so it's very relatable in the networking and songwriting space, but also in the entrepreneurial world as well.
For sure. When I read this quote, I was like, this is literally me in a nutshell and what I believe, because I think honestly, no matter what you do, whether it be songwriting or something else, I think the same thing applies, because for me, it's all about being selfless, giving, and focusing on relationships. And for me, especially with songwriting, if a writer would approach me and say, hey, do you want to co-write? Even if I'm a little like, oh, I'm not sure if we're the best fit or whatever, like I never really turn things down, because you never know where things can go. 10 years from now, they might be a hit songwriter. And if you're still friends, they can be like, hey, do you want to write the song? You never know.
Yeah.
And
Oh yeah.
so I think like some of us, like me included, at some points, I can be someone who wants instant gratification. And when I started in songwriting and music, I realized that that's not really the reality. And so I needed to kind of rewire my mind to think, okay, I just need to give, be present, meet people, be a good person, be selfless. And then just if things come of it, then awesome. If not, then at least you're seen as somebody who gives and is a great person, rather than somebody who just wants success and just focuses on all the wrong things to get it.
You nailed it. And one of the things that we hear a lot of, as as we grow on our path and what we're trying to do to help songwriters, one of the things that when we have conversations with labels and publishers and people looking for talent, a lot of the things that we hear is the same thing of, we want to work with people and find people that are quote unquote a good hang, right? Like they're easy to work with, easy to write music with and songs with, and they kind of to your point are selfless, and they don't make it all about them and say, hey, how do I make this the best for me? It's those that are looking out for everybody involved in the process. And so you hit it on the head there.
Yeah, and I think like when finding collaborators, that's something I focus on as well, because for me it's like you could be the most talented musician, but if you're somebody who's selfish and isn't very nice to other people, then I would rather work with somebody who isn't as high up on the ladder, who's very nice, and rise with them, instead of, sacrificing what I believe morally to just get somewhere. And so, yeah, my focus is always on being the best person I can be.
Absolutely. And I think that's the beauty of what we've seen, right? Is when there are people that you've co-written with or writing music with, and you just have such a good experience with them, you want to kind of tell other people about that, right? And then the buzz starts getting picked up of, man, I keep hearing such good things about Demi, right? Like everybody loves writing with her, and so it kind of helps create this buzz around your name of, one, being talented, but two, like being a great person to co-write with and write music with. And those are one of the things that in those relationships that you're building, to the going back to the quote, right? Like you may not see things for a while, but then if somebody you wrote with then has 4 or 5 years later, and this happens all the time, that one song that was written 4 or 5 years ago all of a sudden starts getting traction and picked up and then put on the radio, and then it's a number one, and you're like, wow, who did you write that with? And it was like, oh my gosh, like I wrote that with so and so forever ago, and now they've got a legit cut or a number one or whatever it is. And it can just help the not only the longevity of your career, but also expand your network so quickly just by doing those things in the very beginning, and doing them the right way.
For sure. So, aside from just being a good person and giving back to the music industry, what are some things you think songwriters should keep in mind when it comes to networking?
Yeah, and I think it's especially in this space of what we're trying to do is put two songwriters in a room together. And what we had found was the big problem was uh, the differing skill sets, if you will, that one brings to the table. Of like, hey, I do lyrics, and you can meet somebody, and they're like, oh, I do lyrics too. We need somebody to do the melody thing. We tried. That's kind of a big part of it. Is how do you help speed the process up of finding somebody that does the melody or the tracks to put everybody in the room together, kind of like that fills the gaps in your skill set. But I think it's really just kind of being honest with yourself and kind of putting ego aside a little bit of here's the things that I maybe am not as strong at when it comes to what I bring to the table, and I need to find those in other people. And that's kind of what we want to make more efficient for people, so they're spending less time finding other people to write with, and spending more time in the room writing those great songs with those great people that kind of fill those gaps in their skill set. um, and so that's a big thing, is kind of putting the ego aside. We hear that all the time of you know very rarely can one person do it all at a very, very high level. When I look at some of the data even that we talk about a lot, like I think since 2000, I think it was 2010, like only 4% of the top 50 songs were written by one songwriter. And if we look at like the songwriter team size, like the Billboard Hot 100 top 10, I think the there was like over 50% are done by over five songwriters on that song. And so there's just kind of that proof in the data that you need to find the other people that are going to help elevate your song, it's going to expand the number of people that are invested in seeing that song succeed, that gives it new perspective and ears and sounds. And within those relationships, they're just those people that are putting everything they have into it so that they can see it succeed.
Absolutely perfect. Perfect. I love how you said the honesty. Because I think sometimes, like even when I started, like I'm classically trained in music and I have an English degree, and so I have like the writing and music, but I don't produce. Like if you want a garage band recording on an iPad, I can give you that, but I don't do production or any
Yeah.
of that. And so like I feel like at a time when I started, I was like, how am I supposed to be a songwriter? Do I have to learn production and music engineering and everything? And then it's like, no, like you said, like you need to find people who compliment you. And I think also, like, once you start to find those people, not only do you bring all of your skills together to make a great song, but when it comes to, like, say the artist isn't in the room and you're trying to pitch, instead of you alone having to use your individual network to pitch songs, if you have four people working on a track, that's four people and four networks that you're trying to build and pitch to. And so I think, it's a win win. And there are some songwriters who like to write on their own and aren't open to collaborating, but once I started co-writing, it's become my favorite thing, and I personally think all songwriters should do it.
Love that. Yeah, and I think it's one of those things where I've definitely had people say like I don't like co-writing, and it's like great, that like
Good luck.
it doesn't hurt my feelings. It's like whatever works for you, right? And but part of me, like there's and I naturally like to challenge things a little bit. Like if they are people that maybe are just starting out that say I don't like co-writing, and they haven't had um like their career hasn't progressed a lot. Like it's one of those things where I kind of want to just say, look, like I could be wrong in this, but maybe there's an internal retrospection that needs to be done of like, why do you not like writing with other people? And it kind of goes back a little bit, could be to the things of like the ego part of it. There's some insecurity things, like there's like the real vulnerability of opening up to somebody and talking about the things that need to go into a song. Like there's kind of that emotional side to it that I think can maybe limit people in wanting to do it. But some people like, I mean, heck, Adele has written songs by herself that are huge smash hits, and it's like, yeah, Adele, do your thing. Just you can keep crushing it. But yeah, I think that everybody's got their preference. But I overwhelmingly always hear it going from I was a little nervous or worried about writing with other people to what you just kind of mentioned, like I love it. And it's opened up this whole new world of how to write songs and the learning and education process that goes along with it. Um, Parallel to, getting better at writing songs.
Oh, for sure. For sure. Yeah, I love how you brought up the educational side of it because personally, I've learned so much about myself as a writer by co writing. I've started to write much better on my own just from writing with other songwriters. And I think the coolest thing is like, once you're able to open up and trust, which I think is a really big thing, like trusting others to be open and emotional and all those things, I think the coolest thing is like you starting to realize what makes a good song because I've been in situations where like I'm writing with songwriters who became great friends and I would say a line that I thought was just like the stupidest line and they're like, to me that's totally like the first line of the song and I'm just like, what? And
Yeah.
then there's other points where like I think I have the best idea and then they all just sit there like we're not doing that. So you get to the point where it's like you're open with sharing your ideas, not filtering them and just putting anything on the table. Because once you have multiple opinions, you kind of get into the bones of it and say, okay, what's good, what isn't, and then build it up from there because you have multiple opinions.
Absolutely. And there's a lot of education that goes into it, but just even on the business side of like, hey, you get in a room, what's the goal of this song? Like, what are we trying to do with it? What's the audience? What's kind of the next step for it all? And, is this for us? Is it for an artist? Is it for sync? Is it for what's kind of the plan for the song? And not all of them have to have plans, obviously, but it's just kind of like, let's get in and write a great song. But it's always kind of being prepared walking into the right of, hey, I've got these 2 3 great ideas or ideas that I've been chomping on, like what do you guys think? And having those pre-writing conversations always helps open up those thought processes of what the co-write would look like. So yeah, it's exciting, and also I think for some people a little terrifying. One of the things that happened that I would never thought about, and it's again going back to preference for people. Some people actually like hated virtual co-writing at first, and then they got used to it. And some people, I don't think there's a way to replicate being in a room with somebody, just kind of the feeling and the vibe and just kind of. But one thing that we did learn through kind of the pandemic, and a couple people reached out and they're like, Kevin, at first, like I was nervous to get in a room with somebody, just because like I'm kind of a shy introvert and, it's hard for me to open up. But they had talked about how the virtual component of kind of looking into the computer or camera or phone and doing co-writing kind of helped them open up even more and be more vulnerable because they weren't in the room with somebody uh, that they had just met, and so they felt a little more relaxed and at ease to kind of have those open conversations about whatever they were writing about. So quick tangent on that. So I just thought I'd throw that one out there.
No, that's perfect. No, that's a great point. Like, I consider myself to be an introvert, and I've definitely gotten less of one from songwriting and doing the podcast and everything. But yeah, I feel like I had my very first co-writing experience with an artist who is originally from Pittsburgh too, but she lives in Nashville and comes back and forth. And before the pandemic, she was like in town, and she came over to my house and we wrote a song. And like I was like totally out of my element, like I've never done this before. And then like when COVID hit, I started to do virtual things, and I got way more comfortable. And I think that led me to be more comfortable with co-writing in general. So when I was in Nashville last November for a retreat, that was like my very first real in-person co-write, and I
Yeah,
was like having the best time ever.
that's awesome.
And so like I think too, like people need to know like their own personalities and what works for them and kind of build up to it, because also too like being nervous about it, like I think I needed to spend enough time writing on my own to discover what are my strengths, what are my weaknesses before I write with somebody else. Because if you have no writing experience and get into a room with other people, you don't really know what to offer and how things go. So I think there kind of is benefits for writing by yourself first, and then once you have a handle on it alone, bring your strength to the table in a co-write.
Yeah, and that's, a lot of this conversation is kind of like when we first were kind of whiteboarding this idea of like the whys behind it, and what are the problems it's really solving. And it's really just again, it's going back to saving time. And it's like how much time do people not waste, but like maybe it's not as efficient when you and I meet and we say, hey, we should write some time, and then we set up a time, and then we meet up and drive and get in a room, and then we get in there like this. Just, I wish I would have known a little bit more information about who I was writing with before this, and known quicker maybe that this wasn't going to be the best match or the best co-write. And that's where we want to help songwriters just be more efficient in finding their co-writers for whatever they need. Is to kind of minimize that logistical back and forth of, well, this was nice and it was good to meet you, but we're never writing again. You go on this first coffee dates with people and you're like, this wasn't great. But nice to meet you. Wish you the best. And man, I just wasted 2 hours, right? I'd rather put those 2 hours towards something a little more beneficial.
Right. No, for sure. I love how you brought up the research because that's something I do a lot. Like everything that I do, if it's co-writing, if it's pitching my music to somebody, just research in general is so important. And I think when it gets into like the songwriting, like when I am writing with somebody new, I'm like, can you send me any music you've written? What's your genre? Like, are you looking to record this yourself or do you want to pitch it? Like, the more information you know about somebody before you get into the room is so helpful.
Yeah, and one of the things, and we haven't posted a ton about it, is we have like a pro tier within We Should Write Sometimes. So, like, if you're a verified professional songwriter, you have the option to toggle between seeing everybody or just other verified professional songwriters. And this is kind of like the first phase of us integrating like a tiered model of like, hey, I have not a clue, but I want to get into songwriting. Like, how do I meet other people at that level? I've been doing it a while. So like eventually we'll start to be able to tier it off and segment it off so that it can be even easier for people to find who they're looking for and kind of the same level-ish. But also integrate kind of like educational things to help them learn and kind of go to the next level, if you will, right? We got we got a big roadmap when it comes to that stuff, but it's like, hey, I'm just starting out. Like, what are the things that I need to know on the business side, but also the craft, and how do I get better at that while, practicing the co-writing thing. And, there's a lot of opportunity, I think, for us to integrate that in a way that doesn't make it feel like it's ads, right? Like, hey, buy this workshop or do that or do this. We don't want to. We want to provide the value to the songwriter and saying, hey, like, no matter where you are as a songwriter, like, we want to help you get to the next level, whatever that may be. And so we're still early in that process, but that's kind of like a big roadmap item for us is how to provide those, whether it's these type of podcasts just to listen to, or it's kind of workshops or coaches or, feedback stuff, whatever, again, we're working through all of it, but I think I think there's a big opportunity to help songwriters with that type of stuff.
That's phenomenal. I love like something I noticed when I was just exploring We Should Write Sometime is like the inclusiveness of it. It's like you can be starting out or you can have more experience. And I think for songwriting, some people just have a more natural touch and they can start more advanced. Some people really want to do it and start very from the beginning, but there's room for everybody. And that's kind of my mentality too. It's like, if you want to do music, if you want to be a songwriter, there's so many different things out there, books, podcasts, courses that can teach you. And I think that if you want to write, like, it's in all of us. We have the ability to. It's just committing the time and learning. So I love how you're so inclusive.
Yeah, and I think too, as and I'll never knock, the dating apps, because I think it was a couple of things they've done just at a phenomenal scale thing, but one is kind of the privacy part of not having to give out personal phone numbers or emails or those type of things. Like, it's all double opt-in, so like no one can message you unless both people swipe on each other. And that's, in the songwriting community, there's a lot of huge writers on our app that, they don't want, they've come to us and said, like, we love your app because, like, I just love scrolling for new talent, and this is an easy way for me to kind of swipe through, click on some links, listen to some Spotify, and check out their socials, see what they're all about, without me needing to, like, give out my email or my phone number in hopes that they're not going to, like, text me one day and be like, hey, do you want to write sometime? And you're like, I don't want to be mean, but no, I don't want to write with you. Like, so there's kind of that added benefit to it as well of, there's kind of that personal privacy and protection to it of, like, hey, I'm not giving out any of my personal information, but I can still kind of set up these connections, and then once you kind of both connect and it's setting up stuff, and then, yeah, for sure, share it. But this way it's not out in the open, and both people need to opt into it.
I love that. That's perfect. I think that kind of raises respect as like another part of networking. Like, even though like the app is like an app and it's not face to face, the same rules apply. Like the same social rules. Like if you would not like nobody would just walk up to a stranger on the street and say they're holding a guitar in their hand. Hi, I don't know you, but like, do you want to write sometime? Like, I would look
Yeah.
around and be like, I want to get
Who are
out
you?
of here right now.
Yeah.
And so that's why I think like being respectful and building those relationships. And if you both agree, like, hey, I kind of see potential in you, I see potential in you, let's meet. But it's not like you just jumping and messaging people without really getting to know them first, because that's just creepy.
Well, and so one of the other features that we added in there, and I much more prefer kind of the conversation that we're having versus me giving like a sales pitch of the app, but it kind of weaves itself in there of each profile has its own QR code, so that, if you posted it on socials like, hey, I'm looking for co-writers, if the other person scans it, it just shows your profile for that other person to kind of look through and see if it's somebody you potentially want to co-write. And so it kind of gives a buffer too, like, to your example, like if someone got off the stage here at Nashville and after a writers round, and people come up all the time like, oh my gosh, you're so good, when can we write, I'd love to write with you. This actually gives a buffer, and you'd be like, yeah, cool, just scan my QR code and I'll check you out. And if it's somebody, and then, if it actually is somebody that might be a potentially good co-write, then the double opt-in can then be completed, versus like, hey, yeah, why don't you, here's my, why don't you look me up, send me a DM or something, blah, blah, blah. And then, then you, like, I don't know who this person is. um, so that QR code is nice because, one, it still kind of, when you meet somebody and they both, connect that way, it's, hey, I'll check out your stuff, and if I like it, great, and if you like mine, great, then we can write. But uh, to your example, it's not the, I don't know who you are, and I definitely don't want to give out my personal contact info at this moment.
Yeah, yeah, for
Um,
sure.
Absolutely.
Awesome. So, can you share just like a very detailed kind of overview of We Should Write Sometime, from, what is involved with setting up a profile and the other features that are available that you haven't talked about yet?
Absolutely. So, for anybody that hasn't set up a dating app, we try to keep it as simple as possible. Where, again, it's free to download and free to use, and we're trying to help songwriters here. So the last thing we want to do is start charging for basic features of stuff. But once you download it, you build a profile. There's a big space for open text field to add in. A lot of people just kind of like copy and paste their bio from the website. But it's, you can put in your style, genre, your inspirations, what you're looking for, location, if you're down to do virtual rights, like kind of the more information, the better, just so people can get a better understanding of who you are. But you also have the opportunity to add links to all of your streaming services, SoundCloud, Spotify, YouTube, all that good stuff, and then your socials as well, Instagram, TikTok, and then also kind of a click menu of what instruments you play and then what skills you have as a songwriter, whether it's top line, lyrics, or melody. And that's really it. And then what it does is uses geolocation, so it'll find songwriters around you within 0 to 100 miles. And then it's a simple click on someone's profile to pull up more information. If it's somebody you potentially want to co-write with, you just give them a swipe right. And if they swipe right back on your profile, then you get notification that you guys have matched. Go to the messaging part, and then you can start messaging to set up a co-write. If there aren't any really songwriters around you, if you're in, Boise, Idaho, and there might be a couple on there, but not a lot. But you can simply just change in the settings portion, change your location to, again, Nashville, LA, New York, are pretty much the biggest cities with the biggest user base. And then just start swiping in those cities too. One of the things that we have in there is kind of like a save for later feature. So if I see it a lot where people will download it, they'll be out and about, and they see a profile, but it's kind of loud, and they don't have, they want to listen to some stuff before deciding yes or no. There's like a save for later button, so you can just kind of put it in a stack of songwriters you want to check out at a later time. And then yeah, so that's kind of the core feature part of it. We try to keep it, again, so stinkingly simple. Some of the cool things that we're planning on adding in here soon, just from like a feature perspective, is uh like adding up to 5 people into a group chat. So say you and I connected, and we're like, man, we really need a track guy or a track girl to really lay this down. You and I could be connected to somebody that we know, and we could pull them into our conversation. And then we're going to have kind of like a calendar integration, so that you and I can see when we're available to do writes, instead of kind of doing this insane back and forth of what dates work and when and how and all that good stuff. So those are two of the bigger features coming, that we're pretty excited about. There's a lot more, but I'll save that for maybe the next time.
Awesome. That's fantastic. I'm like definitely going to join. Like I said, I've seen this
Great.
like around and I just haven't really learned a whole lot, but I think it's absolutely incredible. So, what is some advice that you would give songwriters who are looking to join before they actually join?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those where my advice, if you're looking to join, it's really coming on and just saying, look, like, we should write sometime, is here for the songwriter. And if there are, what's interesting, and I don't know if it's interesting, but I like it, but it's when you first get on the app, you're automatically connected with me in the messages. So you'll see I'll be kind of your first match. Um, it actually is me. So like if you said, "Hey, Kevin, I got a question, or I had a thought or feedback or whatever," I get that, and I'll sit there and respond, just because, like, I think I want to hear as much as I can from songwriters at this stage of feedback, what they like, what questions. I think service at this level is kind of what we're here for. It's songwriters looking to get on. It's like, we got your back, and we want to help you, and whatever that is. Whether it's learning about the business side of it or the craft side of it, like, we're here for you. But for us, it's just like, get on there and just start writing. And you'll see on our socials, like, we love promoting our users, and we do like a weekly playlist of our users. We do like a songwriter of the week stuff. And so if there's, anybody that ever wants to kind of get shout outs, like, that's what we're here for, is to make the songwriter the focal point of what we're trying to do here. So it's just get on, build a profile, and just start swiping. You know, there's no reason to get worried about anything other than me just messaging you and saying what's up, and then you're like, stop it, man.
That's awesome. I think I feel like a lot of songwriters can appreciate how you are just so active in the whole thing because there's so many apps out there, not specifically for music, just in general, that you have no contact at all with the developers or anything. And if you have questions or you just something doesn't work out and you want to get feedback, I love how you are so hands on with it and so committed to making this the best it can be. And so I think a lot of us really appreciate that.
Well, thanks. Yeah, I'd feel weird not being that close to it. I mean, it's literally just myself and my co-founder. So, we have to make sure that we call them like rubber balls and glass balls, right? Like if you drop rubber balls, they'll bounce up, you'll be fine. But there's some glass balls that if we drop those, it's a problem. And one is to us kind of getting this user feedback and being able to be, again, especially at this early stage, getting as much feedback and kind of connectivity to our early users as possible so that we can hear these are things that we would like to see in the future, or these are the things that we don't necessarily need, so that we're not throwing things out there that people don't need or use or need or will use.
Wow, perfect. So it was such an honor having you. Are there any final thoughts you would like to share about We Should Write Sometime?
This has been great. I always enjoy talking to people like you doing incredible things in this space, and thanks for having me
Of
because
course.
you've been doing this a lot, which is great. I've seen some awesome guests that you have, so really the thanks is to you. So thanks for having me. And no, I just think get on and start swiping, and if there's anything, just shout, and I will be there. But yeah, I appreciate it.
Fabulous. Can you share with everyone where they can check out We Should Write Sometime on social and the website?
Yeah, we should write sometime.com. I know it's long, but it's at we should write some time everywhere except for Twitter, where it's just at WS write some time because Twitter's got handle limitations. And here's the funny thing too, and maybe we'll end it on this, and we can look back on it years and just say, "See, I told you." But we had a lot of maybe a handful of older generation thoughts about the name, and they're like, "It's too long. It's too long. It's too long." And I don't necessarily disagree that it's long, especially when you're typing out my email at Kevin at we should write sometime, which I'm fine. People have it. I don't care. But here's the funny thing. I think in the age of social and us doing this organically, getting to the 6,000 users we have at the moment, organically across 5 countries, the social aspect of it, even liking and commenting and doing things on social, the name's so long it kind of sticks out and it kind of catches people's eye some more because it is so long. And so we've had people reach out and say, I wouldn't have known about you except you guys were commenting on my song that I posted, and it just stuck out because it was so dang long. And I was like, yes, that's right.
I think it's awesome. The name is absolutely perfect. It was such an honor having you.
Thank
This
you.
has been lots of fun. Listeners, thank you for listening to this episode with Kevin. And of course, until next time,
Stay
stay right
right
on
on
track.
track.